Hello, I'm Mike Davidge, and I'm going to talk to you about measurement for improvement. So why do we measure? Well, it's said there are three reasons why we might do that, and the first is very familiar to those who work in the NHS. This is a form of measurement where we have to achieve a particular target, often given to us by other people, using data that again often is given to us by others, or at least we're told what we need to collect. In its worst form, this leads to a tick box mentality, and achieving the target becomes the end in itself. The second is familiar particularly to clinicians, and that's when we're trying to discover new knowledge. For example, when we're trying to assess whether this new drug is worth investing in. And this involves a well-constructed trial and collecting lots of data to enable us to distinguish between the effects of the new drug and the existing treatments. Now, measurement for improvement is neither of those. So, what is it? Those of you familiar with the model for improvement will know that it asks three questions. What are we trying to achieve? How will we know that a change is an improvement? What changes can we make that will result in the improvement we're looking for? Now, measurement for improvement is aimed specifically at answering that second question. We're trying to see whether the changes we're making to the service we're involved with are actually moving us in the right direction. In other words, are we moving closer towards achieving our aim? So how does this happen? Well, good measurement doesn't just happen by chance. We need a good process. And I'm going to outline to you the 7 steps that make up this good measurement process. Step 1, decide aims. It's surprising how many projects start off with aims that are too broad or too vague. And this leads to problems when we're trying to measure the effect that that particular project is having or has had. So try this simple exercise. Imagine you're getting into a lift with a colleague and you're both going to the 3rd floor. And you've got the amount of time it takes the lift to go from the ground floor to the 3rd floor to explain what it is that project's trying to do. If you can do it in that time, then you have a good grasp of what you're trying to do. Step 2, choose measures. If we simply list all the different things we might measure, we often come up with a list that's quite large, and it's difficult to know which are the most important. And so there are a couple of techniques that do help you to structure that list of measures that you might have come up with. One is to look at the map of the process that you might have completed as part of the earlier stage of the project. Looking at that process map may give you some ideas about where the most important points are that you might want to pick up. The second, if you have constructed a cause and effect or a driver diagram, you can use that as well to focus in on where you might select appropriate measures for your project. Step 3, define measures. We've chosen the measures we want to use, and now we have to be clear exactly what we mean by them. Let's take an example. We've decided we want to measure complaints. Well, exactly how will we do that? Are we talking simply about the number of complaints received? Are we talking about the percentage of patients who complain? Are we talking about the number of complaints we receive per patient? Taking time to define your measures is important because it provides consistency over time. We've now come to the end of the preparatory phase of those 7 steps. And now we move into the collect, analyse, review cycle. Step 4, collect data. So we need to establish what data items that we need to collect. In our example about complaints, we've gone for the percentage of patients who complain. And so in this case, we'll need to collect the number of patients who complain and the total number of patients. And who's going to do it? We need to be clear whether it's ourselves or whether we're delegating that responsibility to somebody else. How are we going to collect the data? Are they from hospital systems or other sorts of organisational systems, or are they through bespoke surveys? When is the data being collected? Are you doing it real time, or are you looking back over data that has already been collected? And finally, when we're embarking upon a project, we want to know how we're performing now, to act as a baseline against which we measure our progress. And therefore collecting data to establish that baseline before we get into any improvement is important. Step 5. Analyse and present. The way that you present your data has a crucial impact on the way you react to it. So choose your methods carefully. For data about numbers, that is quantitative data, then you'll do that by turning your data into charts. And there are two types of charts that are useful to you here. The first is the run or SPC chart. This helps you to answer the question, how am I doing? Have I improved? A useful further tip is to annotate those charts with the changes that you make when you made them, so that you can see that the change resulted in a difference. The other type of chart is the bar chart, or sometimes called the Pareto chart. You use this to help you understand what are the causes of the particular thing you're looking at. So for example, back to our complaints measure. The Pareto chart is really useful to help you understand what are the most common complaints, and therefore where might you tackle next in terms of making an improvement. For data about words, that is qualitative data, then you might want to display that in terms of a story, a video clip, perhaps a storyboard. That helps to get the message across about what that data that you've picked up, perhaps from patient stories or interviews, is telling you. Step 6. Review measures. The purpose of collecting our data is to help us make better decisions. That doesn't happen by chance. We need to make time as a project team to look at our data regularly and decide what to do next. Are we getting the outcomes we're expecting? What is the data telling us about changes, good or bad? And finally, so what do we now need to do? Step 7. Keep going. And the final step tells us that we should go back to step 4, to collect, analyse and review again. In other words, go round that collect, analyse, review cycle. So, how often do we do it? Interestingly, when I ask people in courses and seminars about that, they often say monthly, because that's the natural cycle of reporting in the NHS. But there's nothing magical about that monthly cycle. In fact, a weekly cycle of collect, analyse and review is much more useful, because a week is a much more discrete time period and people can often relate to what happened in a particular week, which helps to put the measurement into context. And how long do we go round this cycle? There are certain measures that you might be using, particularly measures of process, that once you've achieved a certain level, for example, percentage reliability that's consistently around 100%, you can stop collecting that data. There are other measures, and particularly often this is measures of outcome, particularly patient outcome, that you will want to continue measuring for as long as that service exists, because those measures define how well you're doing in that service. And finally, looking at this data and understanding what it's telling you will always tell you when that particular project has reached its aim, and therefore it's time to stop and move on to something else.